Rosh Hashanah is a day when we examine our actions over the previous year and appeal to God to write our names in the book of life. Our theme for these Yamim Noraim high holidays is human dignity. And today we're going to talk about human dignity and how it relates to social hierarchy. We're going to examine our actions and think about how sometimes society treats some people as though they're inherently more valuable than others. Said in a different way, how sometimes we treat human beings as though they are not. I'm talking specifically about people who work for us. We hear all about essential workers, but for a while, and in some ways today, society considers them essential workers, but maybe inessential human beings. Wait staff, cashiers, drivers, cleaning people, grocery store employees, people that tend to be on the lower end of society's rankings. This is all perfectly shown in a TV episode of The Office, when the warehouse wins the lottery. If you don't remember or haven't seen the show, basically The Office is a television series about the day-to-day of a paper company in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It tends to focus on the upstairs, the white-collar workers, salespeople, accountants. Well, anyway, the warehouse wins the lottery, and everyone in the warehouse quits. The upstairs still needs to figure out how to send out orders and tries out quickly how to do the job. So two salesmen, Jim and Dwight, two of the main characters in the show, laugh and they think, well, they should find a way to move boxes quicker than Madge and E-Day. Jim thinks to himself and says, well, not that they aren't smart people. And Dwight adds, no, very smart. Theirs is more of a physical intelligence. Jim goes, yeah, I'd go with that. Dwight, like baboons or elephants. In the end, I think you can figure out what happens. Jim and Dwight and Aaron and Kevin, no relation, well, they mess everything up and destroy the orders and lose out on all of the sales that they thought they had in the bag because they underestimated the importance of the warehouse workers who worked with them, but they thought worked for them. It isn't just on TV that we see this phenomenon. It happens in our own Torah. In Breshit, chapter 21, verses 9 and 10, we see this happening with Sarah and her servant woman Hagar. Remember, Sarah had trouble getting pregnant, and she finally, in her old age, gives birth to Isaac. Well, she sees her beautiful son playing with Ishmael, Hagar's son with Abraham, and she panics. She can't raise Isaac with the son of a servant. No way! So she insists that Abraham throw out Hagar and Ishmael. Fast forward to Breshit chapter 24, verses 2 and 3, and Isaac's grown up. It's time for him to get married. Abraham sends an unnamed senior servant to find Isaac a wife. Now, this is kind of a funky verse reading today, but this was the common practice at the time. And Abraham trusts this guy, this senior servant, enough to find love for his son, but not enough to use his real name. We find out later through commentary that this was Eliezer, and this is Abraham's trusted servant throughout, and that maybe the Torah leaves Eliezer's name out in this instance because not because he was an unimportant person, but rather to teach us that he gave himself up to complete Abraham's task. Very important task. Think about that for a second. He sacrificed his own identity to complete a very important job for somebody else. Let's remember all of the people who give themselves up to make our lives better. From the Torah to the TV, one of my all-time favorite TV shows, Scrubs, brings this point front and center. Scrubs is a running theme where my favorite character, the Janitor, is probably the smartest character in the entire show, based in a hospital with doctors and nurses. And I want to talk about two scenes from this incredible TV show. In one episode, narrated by the Janitor, the show is usually narrated by one of the characters. Most of the time, it's by JD, who's a doctor. Anyway, in this one episode narrated by the Janitor, we see him spending time with Mr. McNair, a patient who suffers from locked-in syndrome. This is when somebody can't speak verbally, but can communicate over a computer. Obviously, the janitor's neglecting his own cleaning work, but that's part of the comedy of the show. Well, the janitor accidentally breaks this patient's computer and spends much of his day trying to fix it. Suddenly, in the middle, he overhears a doctor screaming for help, screaming for somebody to hold down a patient having a seizure, hold down that patient's legs. The janitor immediately rushes over and holds down the patient's legs, and the doctors are able to get the patient stabilized. And one of them says, "Good job." So the janitor feels really proud. He's a hero. He just helped this patient. He helped the doctor save a human being's life. And he proudly tells everybody within earshot what he did, how he rushed over and grabbed those legs, until he overhears a doctor smugly telling somebody else that the janitor's super proud because he doesn't really contribute much value to the hospital, and this is a one-time thing. Janitor gets upset and confides in Mr. McNair that he knows he doesn't usually save lives like the doctors, but he just wanted to be a part of a community that does. Immediately after he says this, remember he had broken the computer. Immediately after he says this, another doctor comes in and gives Mr. McNair a computer, and Mr. McNair says, "Thank you." The doctor says, "Don't mention it." And Mr. McNair replies, "I wasn't talking to you." In another episode, the janitor places a bet with JD, again, one of the main characters, the guy who narrates the show, he's a doctor. JD prides himself in getting to know everyone. And anyway, the janitor and JD make this bet that JD doesn't actually know everybody in the hospital's name. So JD promptly points out every single person they see, from the nurses to the doctors, some of the patients, until the janitor, someone who he interacts with every single day of the TV show, asks, "Do you know my name?" JD doesn't. In fact, it's a running joke that nobody, including the audience, knows the janitor's real name. He's the janitor. Is the janitor a reference to Eliezer? Maybe, maybe not. I like to think so. But I do see this as a commentary on who society values. A message that we often leave the janitor, the cleaning people, the cashier, the waitstaff, nameless. So what do we do with this information? Martin Buber, a 20th century philosopher, writes about I, it, and I, thou, the two types of relationships people have with each other. In short, I, it is transactional. I am using you to get somewhere. I hired the driver to drive me from point A to point B, and I, thou is really having a conversation with the other person and seeing really who they are. Now, of course, I, it relationships are essential for a working economy. We do use each other to get benefits. But I want to press you to think about really forcing the humanity in these transactional interactions. Ask your driver and food delivery people for their names. Thank the tech support when you're struggling with the internet. Remember, everyone's made B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God. And on the other end, as Hillel famously said, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. You wouldn't want someone yelling at you for making a simple mistake. Maybe think about that next time your waiter or waitress brings you the wrong order. So how do we move on? We've examined our actions. We've seen things that maybe we aren't too proud of. Well, you're in luck. The Yamim Noraim are a time to ask for repentance and to make sure that we don't make the same mistake again. We follow society and we have the goal to be as good as we can be, but sometimes we're trained not to be. Sometimes we see people as less than, and that's just how we're raised. But it's a good thing that we can get better. We follow society, and the goal is to be as good as we possibly can be. In the story of Noah, we see that he was righteous in his time. Emphasis on in his time. We cannot and should not expect ourselves to be perfect, but it's up to us to be righteous in our time as well. Shana Tova Umetuka.